So hello and welcome to another segment of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking to Executive Director of Mental Health America Dutchess, Andrew O'Grady, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, and co-founder of NOAR, the National Organization of Adult Addiction and Recovery, Dr. Larry Force. And today our special guest is Boris Ingberg. He's the Regional Director of Outpatient Services at Mountainside Treatment Center. And thank you, Boris, for joining us today. So Andrew, what's new in the world of mental health?
It's ever changing with this COVID. We've all had to adjust our sails a little bit to provide treatment in a different way. And I think we're going to go up and down. I think we're probably going to try to open up a little bit, make it a little easier, and then we'll have to close it down a little bit using the lessons we've learned. But we want to continue to provide these services and make sure we do it in an appropriate way and in a safe way for our staff and also the people we serve. We've talked about this before. Isolation is a big problem for people with addiction. And that's why this platform, having open discussions and honest discussions about addiction and the way people can get help is so important right now, because sometimes people are afraid to get out of their house and they're home right now, and the alcohol sales are through the roof during this process. And maybe this reaches somebody and gives them a plan to maybe move ahead and look at themselves and get a little help. So we're real happy today to have Boris here. And Boris is going to focus for us on the practice side of things and what's happening on a larger scale. We at MHA have a small, compared to what Boris is working with, a small rehab center, detox center, and also 3 halfway houses serving about 70 people. And it's not large, but it's all in Poughkeepsie, and it meets the needs of those in poverty here in Poughkeepsie. But Boris has a different line, and his treatment practices run from Connecticut to Long Island, very large area. And he's going to talk a little bit about, hopefully, that, what it's like there and how it's working and what works best for people right now. And Larry, maybe you want to...
Yeah, what I would like to do, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Alyssa, for opening this up. And I'd like to, on behalf of the three of us, formally welcome you and formally introduce you. Boris Ingberg is a social worker. And not only did he say he's a social worker, he emphasized that he's a social worker, that he lives that, that paradigm. So that's wonderful. He also is the Regional Director of Outpatient Services at Mountainside. And he came to our table through a connection at Mountainside, Thea. And Alyssa and I attended a lunch a year and a half ago when people were still gathering at lunches. I have a private practice and I have an office in Chappaqua, and that's how Thea connected with me. And then they were doing outreach and invited us to lunch, and it was wonderful. And Thea has been a great connection and a great resource. And when we approached her and said, look, we'd like to have Mountainside being represented in our Intersections platform, she said, I have the person for you. And that person is Boris Ingberg. So with that, I'd like to introduce Boris and welcome him again. And Boris, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your history, about how you ended up, like a capsule view of how you ended up getting to this point where you are right now.
Well, thank you for your introduction, and it's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. I also was introduced to the three of you by Thea, and the introduction was quite wonderful. There's a lot of years of dedication and knowledge between the three of you. There's a lot of effort, continuous effort to welcome people into treatment and provide information and that link out of isolation into treatment. So I'm in wonderful company. Just to say a couple of words, I am a social worker by training, and I got interested in social work and mental health and substance abuse a while ago because my aunt was working at an agency in Brooklyn, and I started volunteering at a facility where there was substance abuse treatment for teenagers. teenagers and immigrants, and it was an eye-opening experience. It was truly, I was in awe of the people who were providing care, how thoughtful, how caring, how dedicated they were. And since then, I worked in an emergency room as a social worker. I worked for a grant from New York City called Thrive NYC, and I managed a team of people who were integrating mental health and substance abuse into primary care. And I ended up at Mountainside, I think in some ways, as a result of many years of being in different places and gathering and collecting knowledge of how treatment happens and how sometimes it doesn't happen so well, and sometimes it really succeeds and really flourishes, even when there's very few resources, very few options. But the dedication of people and the knowledge really make it so that it comes together. So that's a humble background that brings me to Mountainside.
So could I ask you to provide an overview of what a day in your life looks like, of what you're doing?
Absolutely. So,
and also, if you could also talk about not only what a day looks like today, but how it's changed as a result of the delivery of technology, and also under this COVID, bubble.
So I love that you're asking this, because I think change is so prominent in what I do, and I'm in many ways the driver of it, or I'm the person who is aware of the need for changes, and I deliver the process for them. So my days is about sort of multitasking between a whole slew of things. I also wear a hat of a regional director, and I also am a director of a clinic that we have in Chappaqua. And I go back and forth between sort of the minutiae, the details, and managing my staff, and all the tasks that go into it, the crisis, and all the slip-ups, and the people taking 2 steps back and then taking 3 steps forward. And in the middle of all sort of the minutiae comes the big hat. What are we doing as an agency that we're providing support and help? How all the pieces of Mountainside come together around an individual to support them? And to be more specific, to answer your question, so before COVID, I would drive to all of my locations. And then I don't want to use the word out of nowhere, but COVID came. And I think when it came sort of the awareness, we can't continue the way we used to. We cannot be physically in our locations. We cannot have clients in our locations. So in a matter of several days, we really changed. We really transformed. And we went from sitting in our offices and collecting our UTAXs in person and just running groups and all of those services. We went virtual. And that transformation I was so grateful to our staff, because they said, okay, we were doing it this way, but Boris, we're not closing, we're not going anywhere. Our clients need us. And the funny thing is that from what we understand, our clients needed us the most. And when all this uncertainty was happening, when the world was really a shaky and unknown place, our clients were saying to us, please don't leave me. And so we had to really transform ourselves. And we went from a regular outpatient clinic that you walk into and you get your service, to a clinic where everything is delivered virtually. We have a platform, Teams. As everybody else, we fumbled with technology in the beginning. And we realized that if we're fumbling, if we the clinicians fumbling, maybe our clients won't be as well. So we had to make a conscious decision of figuring out a way where we're holding someone's hand from beginning to the end. So we had to really sort of, it's not just about the delivery of clinical care, it's also making someone comfortable. How do we make someone comfortable with being in clinical care in a virtual environment?
That's a great question.
So I'm trying to answer your question by saying the following. We had to realize the reality we're in. We had to realize what are the needs of our clients. What do they need? And how can we come as close as possible to fulfilling those needs? And how do we ask ourselves questions that will make it so that we're as aware of the process as possible. Because if we stop asking ourselves questions, we're going to be very stagnant. And one of the things that we did was we put together a meeting that was a large meeting of all the outpatient clinics. And I started asking people, what are the steps or what are the impediments that the client's reporting and telling us that gets in the way of getting care right now from you as a provider? And by the way, stop me anytime you want me to stop, so I'm happy to pause. So those are the kinds of things that we did. We started asking ourselves a whole lot more questions, and we started paying attention to the transitions in care. So for example, if the client was going from a detox to a rehab, or from a rehab to outpatient clinic, those transitions are when someone was holding the client's hand, and then that holding stopped. And we had to be very conscious of how do we continue to hold the client's hand? How do we continue to reach out to them? How do we continue to make them feel comfortable and cared for? How do we continue to make the client feel that they're not left alone, that the parachute wasn't cut off? We're with them, we're in the box with them, we're in that space, we're sharing that difficult moment, that isolation, that loneliness, that I am alone with my demons moment. We are with them throughout. And we had to really pay attention to that. And we had to reassign and redesign people's roles. I mean, we really had to say, your task is to actually make sure that you reach your client the day before, the 2 days before, and so on and so forth. So it was a real conscious effort on our part to say, we're not stepping back, we're actually stepping in.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. We you know, and on the other end of that, for people living, even if they were living alone, they have a technology barrier of their own. But we have 3 halfway houses, and we were trying to make sure our clients had the connection with you, for instance. I mean, we don't have a lot of clients in common, but with the outpatient provider. And so trying to set that up and make that happen in a private way for them took a little time, but like you, I think our workforces are phenomenal. The people that work as healers in this environment really step up and are flexible and can make this stuff happen quickly. And we did a really good job there, just as you did. And I think it really helped. And in our in our halfway houses, we never had to do virtual stuff. We had to help facilitate virtual stuff with the outpatient providers, but we still had them living with us. So we tried to put our place in a bubble and keep the virus away from us. And that was a focus. But we didn't have to do that. In our care management department, which we have a very large care management, community-based care management, we went virtual like you. And instead of, we did go out and see people in their houses when it was absolutely necessary, but mainly we did this virtual stuff. And we found that the clients felt a lot more connected than they did before, because they can have a lot more contact with the individual, whether it be a FaceTime thing or a Zoom thing, or whether it be just by phone. But if you're spending more time getting on the phone and communicating with our clients, then instead of driving all over the place trying to get to them, they felt a lot more connected. So we're seeing some positive stuff as a result of this. And hopefully we as a community of providers and the state regulatory agencies see that there are some benefits that should carry over long after this is gone.
And Boris, to that point, the lessons that you've learned, that you've implemented, in a moment's notice, they're not going to dissolve. Some of those you're going to bring forward. I mean, are there specific lessons that, I know that for many projects, COVID has been a curveball, but for some projects, COVID has been a fastball, because you had to pivot. You didn't have to do this dance. Am I going to do this virtually, or am I going to do it platform face-to-face? You had to go virtual. So your resources, your energy, your efforts were all placed in that arena. So are there things that, as you move forward, that you'll bring with you, like almost like a hybrid model of sorts?
I'm so glad that you're bringing us to this place, because I think this is a very interesting and very rich question. So we have been reflecting on this. And I think there are 2 ways that we're going to look at this. There's some very immediate lessons that we have learned. And there are some long-term lessons that we're going to look at, let's say in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years. And we're going to say, oh, you know what? This was an interesting turning point. And these are the outcomes that have happened. So more immediately now, what has happened is we always thought that there would be a particular contingency of people who would have difficulties with technology. What it turned out that everyone has different types of difficulties with technology. For example, the younger population needed to learn to take it seriously, meaning they had to learn that whatever's happening in this virtual conversation is a serious thing. If someone who is older was fumbling, logging on, somebody who's younger had to learn how to take this in a different way and how to be authentic in this conversation in a way that they really may potentially have never been. So different individuals, when they engage in treatment, have different ways that they are struggling to engage. So we have to really learn how to set ground rules, for example, for our groups and for our individual sessions. This is what you do, and this is what you don't do. There were other lessons where we had to really think about how do we wrap ourselves around a client. It's not just the session. It's all the other services that come with us. At Mountainside, we are very lucky. We have a number of different services, and we have to really strategically think about how do we really work together to be kind of like a 360 envelope that the client is in. Andrew, you were mentioning a number of other sort of parts to your agency and how all of them come together, and the same thing was happening for us. But what we had to also realize that this curveball, no matter how dizzying it was in terms of being curvy, it also was an opportunity. And after the initial shock of transitioning, we actually had to say to ourselves, what can we do better? What can we enhance? What can we do better? And what can we build? And we did build. And we did see a whole slew of services just mushroom and really being received really well. We have offered a whole slew of virtual groups, support groups around grief, around women's health, around wellness. We would have never imagined that we could deliver wellness virtually, but we got pretty good. We got pretty good at delivering clinical care with a expertise involving the body, involving the mind in a very different way. So all of these things happen because of sort of reflection and immediately asking ourselves, what can we build?
Let me ask you this. Alyssa, are you able to bring up that picture? So here's a picture that we reference in all of our podcasts, our videocasts. So this is a picture of the main building at Hudson River Psychiatric Center that I was driving by in June and coming down Route 9 South, and it caught my eye and I went back and took a picture of it. And then the tagline, mental health at its best, the tearing down of walls. This is the way mental health services were traditionally delivered. State institutions, 90 miles away from, metropolitan areas, everything contained. And we've often referenced, I think every time we put this up, the imagery, the symbolism of those doors. Behind every door, there's a story, there's a family. And now it's being torn down. And Andrew is the poster child, and I mean that in a very positive way, of advocating for tear down those silos. Let's talk about right now. Andrew represents the arena of mental health. You represent the arena of addiction and recovery. And here we are having this conversation, which is what we want to be able to do, to talk about the blending of services. So as you're talking, and I'm watching Andrew, and then when Andrew's talking, I'm watching you, there's a lot of affirmation on both parts. Like, yeah, we do that, we do that. But yet you come under different labels, and sometimes you come under different regulatory issues. And, with Mountainside, you're in different states, so you have to dance with different regulatory agencies and different state systems. But maybe the two of you could talk about how, because you both have been in the field around the same amount of time, and here you are, now we're having this video cast using a technology platform talking about how things are and how things, you know, ideally could be. So maybe for the two of you, maybe you could just talk a little bit about, you know, if tomorrow you wake up and this miracle happens and it's then the delivery of services are just the way you would hope they would be, what would it look like? What's missing? What can we use? And I love your statement about, you know, the 360-degree envelope. And I love your statement about curveball, but opportunity. So maybe, you know, the two of you could just, you know, reflect on that for a second. Thank you, Alyssa.
Well, you know, I wish there was no wrong door. I've done this for 30 years, and I've gone through periods where Minkoff would come and talk, and the county would hire him to train everybody to make sure that everybody got treatment for whatever they needed in any door they walked in. And, you know, and we do this dance, you know, I think I'm more in the world of the governmental arena than maybe Boris now. You have a more of a private entity, I'm thinking. But I just, you know, we go through these dances. Everybody thinks, oh, we got to train everybody in this, and we got to train everybody in that, and people forget about it a week later. And we go back to our, well, if I'm, you know, in Dutchess County, we have a helpline. And people can call helpline and say, I want to get into treatment. Well, tell me what's going on. Well, I've been extremely depressed. I've been suicidal. I've been, you know, clearly there's a mental health piece to it. So the person wants a therapist. And then all of a sudden, the next question is, well, do you drink alcohol? Well, yeah, I drink about, you know, it helps me get to sleep at night. So I drink, you know, 2 glasses of bourbon or a glass of bourbon. And all of a sudden the person, well, you have to go to the alcohol and substance abuse clinic. I mean, the alcohol and substance abuse clinic doesn't want to deal with your mental health stuff. So you're dealing with all this PTSD, and you have to focus on why you're drinking, and you know, and you have to stop drinking, and you have to be compliant, and you have to test negative, and you have to do all this other stuff. And it's just, I've seen it too many times where the people just drop out because it's not addressing the common, the true issue. And I think we just have these silos, and we have to just break them down, and we have to, you know, we have to provide the care somebody needs when they walk through the door. Everybody that works in our entities are trained to do that, but we get so focused on what we have to deal with, and it doesn't look at the whole person. Now, I love what you were saying, Boris, about your groups, and it sounds like you're doing that in a better way than many of us public entities are doing. It sounds like you're having, you know, wellness checks, and you're looking at the whole body, and that's phenomenal. And that's the way I wish I think our agency's doing that as well. And that's why we're merging with this Mark agency that does the addiction stuff. And we have the mental health over here, and we're combining the two, and people are getting the care from the mental health care managers at all the houses, and everybody, and it's a much better experience for the clients we serve. But I wish if I could wake up tomorrow that our whole system of care would be like that. And it isn't. It really is hard to get somebody from into one door when they really, you know, if they really need it, because they're already in this door, you know, and that's not the way it should be.
So Andrew, I completely agree with everything you say. So I'm not going to use my words to repeat it, but I will say that, you know, it's a very interesting world we live in. At some point, this made sense to someone. At some point, there was a reason why this was done. And I'm not going to knock down every single wall. But what I will do is I will encourage my clinician to get on the phone and get in touch with anyone and everyone my client needs them to get in touch with. So, and this is more of a, what am I doing now? Kind of a way of looking at it is, if my client needs eating disorders treatment, let's find that. Let's partner and collaborate as closely as possible with any provider that this client needs. So if this client really is looking for trauma-based therapy that is beyond what we can do, or if someone has an eating disorder or something else that is so profound and just needs that really specialized treatment, let's partner up. I am interested in partnering up with primary care. I'm interested in partnering up with therapists in the community. I actually love doing that because they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of sort of institutional knowledge about the area and the history and all kinds of things that I might not. So long story short is that silos I can use for my benefit. Deep down inside, I don't want the silos to be. I wish they weren't there. I wish we had knocked down quite a few. And I'm going to continue to work to do so, to knock them down, but I'm going to work around them in order to get my client the type of care that they need. And I'm going to figure out specifically what do they need. I'm going to partner with the client first, and I'm going to bring in whoever it is that they need onto my team, however I can do it.
Nice. Well, that's the way it should be. So
That's
that's
wonderful.
great.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So any summary remarks from anyone?
Well, Boris, you're in Poughkeepsie, so and visiting. So you could drive up Route 9 past Marist College and look to your right, going north, and you will see that building. There's only about a wall left before it goes down completely, but it's still there, hanging on by a thread.
I might have seen it already. I think I just want to summarize it by saying I'm really grateful that you invited me. I love your perspectives, and you guys have been in this field for so long, and you bring a lot of wisdom and really practical things to this conversation. So I really enjoyed myself, and I really want to thank you.
I'm glad you joined us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Boris, for taking time on your holiday to spend time with us. And thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. If you'd like to hear this program again, share it with friends, you can log on to our Digital Resource Center on our website, www.intersections-exchange.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I hope you join us again next week as we continue our conversation on Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange.